Have you ever wondered why you feel so exhausted, so available to everything and everyone? Except you. You're always there, answering messages, solving problems, saying yes, even when your body is begging for no. And you know what's worse? People get used to it. They think you can handle everything, that your energy is infinite, that you do not need rest, not even room, no respect. But there comes a time, something inside you starts screaming. A fatigue that is not only physical, it's from the soul. The invisible cost of always being available. At some point in life, we have all felt that silent pressure to always be available for everything and everyone. It is as if we say yes automatically, as if our constant presence is a proof of love, of loyalty, of value. But there is a hidden price in this behavior. Is it coming now? Subscribe to the channel, activate the Tinkerbell, so you don't miss anything of what's to come. An emotional, psychological, and even spiritual cost. And this cost is often paid with one's own identity. Carl Jung said, "He who looks out dreams, he who looks in wakes up." And that phrase gives us a powerful key. When we live only according to what others expect of us, whether at work, in relationships, in the family, we are constantly looking outside, trying to interpret the desires of others, adapting our way of being to what we believe others want. We live in a collective dream, lost in roles that don't always represent who we really are. The person who is always available risks disappearing within himself, because little by little, it is molded to external needs. It is yielding, bending, silencing. And the next thing you know, you're tired, exhausted, emptied. This continuous giving, often praised as nobility, can turn into self-sabotage, a kind of self-abandonment that does not scream, but consumes. What you resist persists. Jung reminds us that running away from our inner truths does not rid us of them. On the contrary, when we ignore our need for rest, space, introspection, we feed a silent dissatisfaction that begins to manifest itself in the form of anxiety, anguish, frustration. And then we ask ourselves, why do I feel so bad if I'm doing everything right? But right for whom? Being too available is also often a subtle way to seek acceptance. Saying yes to everything is a way to avoid the fear of being rejected, of not being needed, of being alone. But Jung provokes us to go deeper. He who accepts his shadow, he becomes whole. Our shadow is this hidden place where we keep our unmet needs, our repressed resentments, our willingness to say no. That has been swallowed up by fear. And only when we look at it with courage and sincerity do we begin to walk the path of authenticity. At heart, constant availability is an attempt to be loved, but a love conditioned on performance, utility, boundless surrender. And the saddest thing about it is that the more available we are, the more we move away from the chance to be loved for who we really are, and not just for what we offer. The real turning point begins at the moment when we ask ourselves, what if I'm not always available? What if I can't answer it now? What if I choose me? The answer at first may be accompanied by guilt, but over time, it turns into peace. Jung deeply believed that individuation, this process of becoming who we really are, only begins when we stop living only for the external world and start looking inward with honesty. And that's when everything starts to change. The liberating power of no. Saying no may seem like a small, almost insignificant act, but in many cases, it is the gateway to freedom. For someone who has spent his whole life trying to please, trying to avoid conflicts, being the support of everyone, no can sound like a betrayal, as if by refusing something, you are becoming a bad, selfish, ungrateful person. But is it really? Carl Jung said, "He who does not confront his limits never goes beyond them." And here is an important paradox. We only find out who we really are when we have the courage to set limits, and that requires maturity. Saying no isn't just about protecting yourself. It's also about asserting yourself. It is a gesture of integrity with one's own soul. Often the fear of saying no is born from the illusion that we need to be everything to everyone. But in trying to be everything, we end up being nothing to ourselves. Jung believed that each person carries within himself a sacred, unique core, which needs to be respected. And every time we violate that core, whether out of fear, guilt, or insecurity, we drift away from our true essence. No is often the first step to saying yes to our truth. It delimits where the other ends and where you begin. And it's not about creating walls, but about building healthy borders. Borders that say, "Here I am, with my needs, my time, my silence, my rhythm." Because without these limits, life becomes an emotional mess, where everything mixes. The pain of the other becomes yours. The responsibility of the other becomes yours. The desires of others suffocate yours. What you deny, you submit. What you accept transforms you. Jung reminds us that it is by accepting our own weaknesses that we become strong, and there is no greater force than to assume with serenity that we cannot be everywhere, serve all people, solve all problems. It takes courage to stop being the savior and finally become human. The no also reveals intentions. When you stop being always available, some people pull away. But this is not loss. It is revelation. Because those who only approached when they needed something disappear. And those that remain even when you set limits, those yes are real. They are bonds based on truth, not utility. Jung said that suffering comes from the distance between who we are and who we appear to be. And often this distance is fueled by our constant attempt to please. The courage to say no is a bridge between what we feel and what we express, between what we desire and what we allow. When you start to say no, you are amazed at the silence that comes afterwards. And this silence can be uncomfortable at first, but soon it turns into something precious. In it, you hear yourself more clearly. You realize that you can rest, breathe, reconnect. This is where the real transformation happens. Saying no is actually saying yes to a life with more presence, more purpose, and more peace. When you change, everything around also changes. There is something curious about the journey of self-knowledge. When you begin to transform from the inside, the world around you also begins to change. At first glance, it seems coincidental, but it's actually a consequence. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny." And that's exactly it. When we live unconsciously, always available, always accessible, always depending on the other, we end up losing ourselves in patterns that we do not choose, but that we repeat. But when you wake up, when you begin to see how much this unrestricted availability hurts you, exhausts you, disconnects you from yourself, something changes profoundly. You start living with more intention. It starts asking different questions. Why do I keep putting myself in this place? What am I trying to prove? Where does this urgency to please everyone come from? And these questions are not weak. They are keys, because every answer that emerges brings you back home, to your essence. Jung also said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. When you understand your own wounds, your shortcomings, your voids, you stop expecting others to fill in what only you can heal. And suddenly you stop chasing after, begging for attention, unfolding to fit into places that do not welcome you. And then the world responds. People around you begin to see you differently. Some turn away because they can no longer feed on your energy. Others approach because they recognize in you something rare, someone who knows himself, who respects himself, who knows where he is going. And that's magnetic, because authenticity attracts what is true. Your energy changes, your field changes, your posture changes, and with that, the world responds. What was once chaos has become order. What was once a choice becomes a choice. What used to be dependence has become freedom. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a process that starts the moment you stop, breathe, and say, enough. I will no longer abandon myself. The magic is not in closing yourself off to the world, but in opening up, first, to yourself. When you treat each other with more respect, you naturally begin to surround yourself with healthier relationships. You no longer accept crumbs. You don't run after people who don't see you anymore. You no longer feel guilty for putting your peace first. Loneliness is not being alone. It is being in bad company. Jung reminds us that being with others at any cost can be lonelier than being with yourself in peace. When you learn to enjoy your own presence, you are no longer afraid of silence or absence. You understand that loneliness is not punishment. It is space. Space to listen, to rebuild, to align with what is true. And when that alignment happens, everything changes. You realize that you no longer need to be accepted by everyone. You understand that your light bothers those who still live in the shadows. But still, you follow. Because now you know. Your availability is no longer a bargaining chip. It's choice. And conscious choice is freedom. Jung wrote, "That which we do not face in ourselves, we will find as fate." So when you confront your compulsion to please, to serve, to annul yourself, you break the cycle. You take the reins. And from there, nothing is like before. You don't have to shout or explain yourself. When you change inside, the world changes around you naturally. Because the universe respects those who respect themselves. You stay. The rest rearranges. At the end of the day, it's not about ego. Not even proud. It's about emotional survival. Of integrity. To finally choose yourself without apologizing for it. You weren't created to be everything to everyone. You are not here to wear yourself down by maintaining relationships that exist only when you sacrifice yourself. Carl Jung left us a truth that few have the courage to live. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are. And the truth is, when you stop being always available, the whole world reconfigures itself. The fakes are gone. The real ones reveal themselves. Priorities adjust. Peace breathes again in your room, in your body, in your silence. So do not be alarmed if, when changing, you lose some people. Be afraid if, by giving too much, you end up losing yourself. You deserve to live a life where your presence is not required as an obligation, but valued as a choice. And it starts when you look in the mirror. And with all the firmness in the world say, from now on, I also count, I care too. I'm staying too. The day you stop being always available, it's the day you finally start living